So the last topic I want to talk about in this section of use cases of blockchain being money are things called stablecoins, and I'll also talk about what's called a central bank digital currency, or CBDCs. I won't talk a lot about CBDCs. I'll just introduce the idea. Okay, so the idea of a stablecoin is, could you have a cryptocurrency with a stable exchange rate to, for example, the most common one is the US dollar, just because at least here, when we tend to use, well, I don't know how to describe it. So lots of blockchain industries are based in the US. And so the US dollar is also used in a lot of countries. If other countries have other currencies, converting to US dollars is very, very common. And so for a variety of reasons, the US dollar has become the dominant thing to try and convert, or try to peg your currency to. Okay, so I'll use it as the running example, but you could do a stable coin with anything else. Okay, so a stable exchange rate to US dollar. So what does that mean? So you can think of it as in two ways. One is that it doesn't fluctuate much. So if you recall from a few lectures ago, we had a chart that looks like this. And in the chart, you can see that the euro, the Canadian dollar, and the British pound, they're pretty stable relative to each other. Okay, there is a bit of fluctuation, but certainly compared to Bitcoin, they all tend to be relatively stable with each other. So could you do another cryptocurrency that maybe would look kind of like a horizontal line if you were to draw it across this chart? Okay, so that's the idea. Now, a more extreme version is, well, what if it was exactly a US dollar? Okay, so it could be that you have something that kind of looks like the US dollar or another government currency, or you could also have something that's exactly a US dollar. Okay, and the question is, well, we don't know how we're going to do that yet. Okay, but if it's going to be exactly a US dollar, one option is that this is somehow, there's some system that controls it. Okay, so it's a controlled system. So we set up some system that's going to try and control the price of the token and make sure that it matches a US dollar, or at least as close as we could. Or a more extreme version is it's a US dollar because the US government decides to put the US dollar on Ethereum, and they issue a token and say this is the digital US dollar. Okay, so that in that case it would be also exactly a US dollar because it's issued by the government. And this is what we call a CBDC, which is a central bank digital currency. So this is something that I won't talk about beyond this, so I'll just give you a bit of background. Most central banks around the world are looking at this as an option. They're not necessarily going to create a token and put it on Ethereum, right? In fact, that seems to not be the case at all. What they could do is they could do their own blockchain system, or they might not use a blockchain at all, right? It might just be kind of like, Visa or your Subway tokens or other systems where the central bank just says, here's a digital dollar, we have a database, and we're going to make sure that everyone's balance stays up to date. Okay, so there's lots of different ways of issuing a CBDC. Because it's so complicated legally, technically, trying to find out the right designs. Banks have been studying it in earnest for the last 3 or 4 years, but in Canada, for example, the Bank of Canada have had a digital currency team going back to the 90s. This is something that's probably not going to come out for, years from now, if at all, right? It's possible that they decide not to do it, okay? But they are exploring it. Some countries more than others. So China has done a pilot of some technology, but I'm not sure how serious they are about actually implementing it. Sweden has a problem where cash use is in decline, and that creates some other issues for the central bank. And so they're also piloting, or they might have actually deployed a krona that's electronic. I forget the exact status of it. There's an island in the Caribbean that has an operating central bank digital currency. There's another island that made Bitcoin legal tender. So instead of issuing their own, they're working with existing cryptocurrencies. And so anyway, there's different experimentations that are happening. And so this is something to keep an eye on. Now, if we don't have this, then what we could do instead is someone else could say, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just operate as kind of like a bank. And what I'll do is if you want a digital dollar on Ethereum, you give me a real dollar and I'll issue a token that says that this thing's worth $1. Okay. And so that's one way that you can design it. So that type of system, we call it a directly backed stablecoin. So I'm not going to go through all the categories, but I will go through 3 major ones. Okay, so basically you have a company, and in this case they're trusted. So this might not sound like something that is in the spirit of blockchain, right? Where the idea is decentralized. But these are very popular on Ethereum. Okay, the largest one, Tether, is I think the 3rd or 4th most valuable token behind Bitcoin and behind ETH itself. But I don't know that there's another token that's more valuable than this stable coin. And then there's other ones that are also very, very, very popular. So you have a company that's trusted that takes US dollars and issues the equivalent amount of tokens. So tokens are something like ETH, like a cryptocurrency, basically. For now on, I'm only going to talk about stablecoins on Ethereum because that's where you see them most often. So this is a token that's on Ethereum. It's run in a smart contract. So you set up a smart contract. There's a standard for doing tokens called ERC20. And it basically, and there's libraries as well. So if you want a token, it's very easy. You can basically just click a couple buttons and you can have your own token on Ethereum. And the smart contract is just an accounting system for it. So it keeps track of how many there are in circulation, the addresses that own them, and that type of thing. Okay. So you basically say, okay, I have this token, it's worth $1. One token's worth $1. And if you give me 1,000 real dollars, I'll give you 1,000 of these tokens. Okay. And now you might say, well, what about the reverse? What if I have these tokens, I come back to you and say I want my $1,000 back? Okay, so you could offer redemption. Okay. Now, not all companies. No. Okay. Let me say that if you offer redemption, then this is a much better system. It's clearly, the case that these tokens are going to be more tightly tied to the U.S. dollar. Now, for redemption, you are trusting. This is why I say trusted. Okay. So they might issue you the tokens, but then when you come back and say I want the U.S. dollars back, they say sorry, right? Or they say, oh, our system's broken, it's shut down. We wait 3 months. There's nothing we can do, right? And so that's why it's a trusted company. So you don't know that you're going to get your money back, okay? But anyways, what companies could do to bolster their confidence in the system is that they could offer this redemption. Now, some companies don't, or some companies, they say they offer it, but there's so much friction and like paperwork and limits and stuff like that you can't easily redeem your tokens. Like if you go through a huge process, you might be able to redeem them, but effectively, it's not like clicking a button. It's not like in this case, where you have your US dollars, they'll give you the tokens right away. But when you want to go back and redeem them, there's a lot of friction there. So some don't offer. But if the company is reputable, right, then they know, and let's say that they don't offer redemption, okay? And so the problem that you have now is if you accept one of these stable coins, one of these tokens, right, you're worried that is someone else going to accept it, right? Is it a good medium of exchange? And if no one else is going to accept it, well, at least I can redeem it, right? But now I'm saying I can't redeem it, right? And so you might get stuck holding this thing that you think is worth $1, but it ends up not being worth anything or worth less than $1, okay? And so if it ends up being worth less than the dollar, then the company that issued this token, if they're a true legitimate company, they see that this token, say, offered for 90 cents, and they know they have $1 in a bank account that corresponds to that token, right? They'll buy it from you in a heartbeat. Why wouldn't they? They would go buy something that's worth 90 cents, and then they would take the $1 out of the bank account, and they just made 10 cents, okay? So even if there's no redemption for users, the company has an interest in redeeming any tokens that end up worth less than $1, because they have $1 of in assets that back that token. Okay. So anyway, so just because a company doesn't offer redemption doesn't necessarily mean that the whole system fails as a result. Okay. But in that case, the company, there should be a market. It should be really hard for the price of it to go down, because as soon as the price goes below $1, the company just starts buying them up. Okay. So if you see a stable coin where the price is going down, right, then that tells you something about the reputation of the company. Like maybe they don't actually have all the money. Maybe they're not actually keeping all the money that backs these stable coins. Okay. Now an example of a company that does this, the largest one, is called Tether. And Tether was actually caught not having enough money to back these coins. In this case, they're related to an exchange, and so they had sort of done some sort of loan from Tether, the company, to the exchange company, and there was, the government actually stepped in this case, and there was some regulatory action that was taken against them. But what was interesting about the Tether case is that even though the company doesn't look fully trusted, okay, there's also some speculation about whether they actually have the tokens that back it. There's some people have done forensics on how they issue new coins, and it doesn't seem to correspond. New tokens seem to come into existence, that doesn't correspond to US dollars being, put into the company. They seem to be coming into existence for other reasons, like it seems like a profitable time. And there's been other speculation too that because they don't claim to hold the money in a bank account, what they claim to do is go out and buy other assets that are like equivalent to cash or very easily convertible into cash. But the problem is that the markets for buying this kind of stuff are small, and the amount of money that they allegedly have in these markets is large. And so it would be hard for the company to, actually buy what they say that they're buying without the traders in these markets knowing about them, because they would be a very large trader. And if you go to the people that operate in these markets, they're like, yeah, we've never seen trades that look like, a large company like Tether. And so anyway, there's a lot of sort of speculation around whether Tether actually is being completely forthright with all of the assets and where they're held and things like that. And so you would think that the system, would fail, or that people would stop using it. But it turns out that it doesn't fail. And the reason why is because it's actually just so useful. It's so useful to have a US dollar that's on the blockchain that people are willing to, it seems like, kind of look the other way, even when it looks like maybe this system isn't completely legitimate. Why is it so useful? So one of the main things that people use cryptocurrencies for is speculation. So you have people who are betting on the price of things going up or the price of things going down. So let's say you think that the price of Bitcoin is going up. That's fine. So you go out and you buy some Bitcoin, and you buy it on one of these exchanges. And it turns out that now that you're looking at the price, it's not doing what you want it to do. Okay. In fact, maybe it's trending in the opposite direction, and you're like, I want to get out of this position as quickly as possible. Okay. I want to sell my Bitcoin back to US dollars. Okay. And so what are your options? Like, what does that mean? Sell it back for US dollars. So you basically have three options on an exchange. One is that you can sell an asset for like money that's in your account on the exchange. So you can just go to the order and say sell it, and then the exchange will say, okay, now you own $100 instead of 0.0001 of a Bitcoin or whatever. Okay, but that $100 isn't in your pocket. Okay, it's $100 that's deposited on the exchange. So you can sell an asset for money that's on the exchange. You can sell the asset or actually let me just extend this. So you can first do this step, and then you can actually withdraw it from the exchange. So you can say, hey, I want my money off the exchange. And so they'll say, okay, well, that's an extra $50 and for a wire transfer, and it's going to take us 7 days to process that or something like that. Okay, so there's a lot of friction with it. So if you have Bitcoin and you want to turn it quickly into Canadian dollars, you can turn it into basically money that the exchange owes you. You can actually get it off the exchange, okay, but this is going to be 3 days at least, and fees. In this case, you have money, but it's sitting on the exchange. So you can, for example, let's say you see a better price on a different exchange. How do you move the money from this exchange to the other exchange? Well, you'd have to go through the withdrawal process, and then you would have to set up an account on the other exchange and deposit it. Okay, so there's a lot of friction that way. Or what you could do is you could sell it for a stablecoin. So because Tether was launched by one of the most popular exchanges, they had a very tight relationship with that exchange, still do. And so it was just, Tether became kind of dominant because it was being used on the dominant exchange. And the nice thing is if you sell for a stable coin, okay, then you can transfer it. It's easier to withdraw. Okay, you can go and you can withdraw it, but you don't have to use the banking system. Withdraw just means that that they send it from their address, their Ethereum address, to your Ethereum address. So this is an Ethereum transaction. Or you could even ask the exchange, hey, there's this other address, I want you to send it over there. Okay, so you can basically do this right away. Now fees, you will pay some fees. Unfortunately, when I'm recording these lectures, the fees on Ethereum are significant, but that's subject to change with both the new version of Ethereum and then operating on other things called layer 2s. But anyways, you can sell the stablecoin and withdraw. Okay, and then you can easily transfer it to another exchange or just take custody of it yourself. Okay, so stablecoins became very useful because there's so much speculation. So speculators like it because when they want to get out of a position, they want to convert their position back to US dollars, they just convert it directly into a stablecoin, and then they can move that stablecoin around the ecosystem, across any DeFi services on Ethereum, and they can do it without any friction. Okay, So this is a directly backed stablecoin. Now, would there be a way to get rid of Tether? So we want to live in this blockchain world, where we don't have these big trusted parties. And so the fact that we have a trusted party here is problematic. And so there is an interesting proposal. It's not as popular as Tether or some of the other companies, but it is still reasonably popular. It's definitely in the top 10 stable coins that are on Ethereum. And there's a couple different companies that do it, but the one that I'm thinking of is called DAI, named after Wei Dai. And so you'll recall I actually made a mistake in the earlier lectures by confusing the terms Wei and Dai. So Wei Dai invented a predecessor to Bitcoin called B-Money. And so Ethereum decided to name their smallest unit after him, so they call it a Wei. And this project decided to name it stablecoin after him, and so they call it a DAI. Okay, so DAI works a little different. So the idea here is that we want to do a stablecoin without a company, without a trusted company holding US dollars. Okay, and so the idea of DAI is you take some amount of Ethereum. So whatever, let's say this is 0.006. Let's add another zero, make it a little more realistic. And let's say that this is what $1 US is worth. Okay, so there's going to be no actual US dollars in this case. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to set up a smart contract. And I'm going to dump $1 worth of ETH into this smart contract. And I'm basically going to sell this contract to you and say, hey, instead of me giving you a US dollar, I'll just give you the equivalent of $1 US. Okay. Now the problem is, well, what if the price of ETH changes, right? If it goes down, it's not a problem. Okay. If the price of ETH goes down, then what happens is that I have more than a US dollar, so I can just give you $1 US worth, and then I can actually keep this difference as a profit. Okay. But if the opposite happens, okay, the price of ETH goes up. Sorry, the price of ETH goes down, then this is no longer worth $1 US. And so what I'd have to do is I'd have to give you all of this, plus I would have to give you a little bit more. And then how do you know that I'm going to come back and give you a little bit more if that were the case? Okay. So this is the idea of DAI. The idea of DAI is that you lock up $1 US worth of ETH, and you lock up a little bit more, usually 50% more, to serve as a kind of buffer. Okay, so half of this would be 3. And it's worth 50 cents. And this will be a kind of buffer for price changes. So if prices change, what I'm going to do is I'm always going to give you a US dollar. Okay, so a DAI, so let's call this whole thing, we'll use the modern terminology. They used to be called CDPs, they're now called vaults. So this is a vault. It contains 1.5 US dollar. And so DAI says you can always get $1 US worth of ETH out of the vault. So I give you DAI, it's a token, and I basically say, anytime you want to come back to the vault, I'll figure out what the current price of ETH is in US dollar, and I'll give you that amount. So it's probably going to be more or less than this initial amount. Okay, this is the initial amount when I created the vault. Okay, but it's going to change, and that's fine. We'll let it change, and I'll give you more or less depending on what happens to the price. Okay, so that's the basic idea of DAI. Now, there's two problems here. The first one's maybe a more minor problem, but where do we get the price of US dollars in ETH? Okay, so we don't have it on the blockchain. The blockchain doesn't know anything about what's going on in the US economy and what people are paying for ETH in the US dollar. Okay, and so where do we get that price from? And so the answer is, well, a trusted party is going to put that price on the blockchain. Okay, so this is called an oracle. Now you might say, whoa, wait a minute. I mean, the reason we don't like Tether is because we are using this trusted party. Okay, and so the whole idea down here was like to do something where we don't have to trust anyone. It's just a smart contract. But now you're telling me we need a trusted party to put this price on. And it should be obvious to you that if they do it wrong and put the wrong price, all sorts of disastrous things could happen. Okay, and all of that is 100% true. The difference here is, first off, the oracle, you can take the prices from more than one oracle. So you can go ask 4 or 5 people. You can take the average price or the median price is what you would tend to do. And so you can distribute that trust amongst multiple different people. Okay. And oracles, you know, maybe they've been running for a long time. You know, they build up a reputation over time, and so eventually you sort of learn to trust them. And so what this does is, what DAI does is it kind of minimizes the trust in a sense. So in Tether, you're putting a lot of trust into this company because they're literally sitting on the money. In this case, you're just putting a smaller amount of trust because all they're doing is updating prices. Okay, and it's agile trust. You can change it, and you can have more than one party. Okay, so for some people, anyways, they buy the argument that the amount of trust in a system that relies on an oracle is somehow less than it is on a company that's going to back the stable coins. There's systems like Chainlink that have very complicated systems for trying to ensure that your oracles are almost like miners, right? Like they, you have a whole bunch of them, and they're all giving you the price, and they're all having this sort of agreement or consensus amongst themselves. And so it could be that eventually someone solves this problem and makes like a truly decentralized oracle. Okay. So anyway, so that's the first problem, and that's it's not a solved problem, but there's an argument for why it's at least interesting to look at. The second problem you have is, well, what if the price of ETH goes down so much that not only do you have to give the person all of the money here, you have to give them all the money here, and then even if you add these things up, you know, what started as $1.50 US is now worth 90 cents or something like that. So it eats up the whole buffer as well. So let me just help you visualize it first. So if the price stays the same, then when you come back later, you're going to get this piece of the vault, and the person who's created the vault will keep the remainder. If the price goes up, that means ETH is worth more, and that means that this is worth more than $1 US, meaning a smaller chunk has to be given. So you'll always get $1 US worth when the price goes up. And then now the person who set up the vault, they're keeping all of their buffer, plus they get to keep a little bit extra. Now you might say, well, who's the person that's creating these vaults? They're kind of like people, they're actually betting on the price that ETH goes up, because if ETH goes up, they make money. And so it's kind of like owning ETH, sort of like speculating on the price of ETH. There's some leverage that's mixed in. It gets complicated, but the people who create these vaults are people basically that think the price of ETH will go up, and they make money if they're right, and they lose money if they're wrong. Okay, so let's consider the case where it goes down. If it goes down, then if it goes down a little bit, then you're going to get all of the initial amount, plus you're going to get some of the buffer, so that the two add up to $1. Okay, and then the case that we're talking about now is, well, what if it goes up, or the price goes down so much that you eat all of this, all of the buffer, and you still don't have a US dollar? Okay, then what do you do? So in this case, what DAI says is, they say, well, we're going to watch it. We're going to watch the price. And if it gets close, we're going to basically cancel your DAI and redeem it. It's, once again, more complicated because they put all their vaults together. And so it's not like someone reaches in your pocket and takes your DAI and converts it to US dollars. But anyways, what they're going to do basically is they're going to watch the price, and if it gets close to being insolvent is the term I'll use, meaning that there's not enough money there, not enough ETH to cover $1, they're going to do they're going to take some action, and I'm not going to go through all the details of what that action entails. It's called liquidation, and there's some penalties that are paid for people not topping up their contracts, and there's a whole bunch of complicated economics. Liquidation has happened. So there was one incident a couple of years ago from when I'm recording these lectures where the price of ETH went down a lot, 30% in a day, and it's called Black Thursday. And a lot of these smart contracts, they just, their buffer was gone, and so people tried to liquidate it. The problem is that because the price went down, everyone was trying to move their Ethereum around. And so the network got jammed up with lots of transactions. And so you couldn't get anything done because there were so many people trying to send transactions at the same time. And Ethereum can only handle so many transactions per block. And so basically there was a lot of congestion. And because of it, people were, getting liquidated, and they were... it's sort of complicated without going through the mechanics of it, but let's just say people lost a lot of money, okay, as a result, because they couldn't get their transactions through. The other problem is that, remember, the Oracle, it's supposed to be feeding in the prices. So even when the prices started to recover, right, the Oracle systems also couldn't get their prices, their new prices, into Ethereum very fast because of the congestion. And so the prices were kind of stale. They were like old prices. Bad prices, right? Prices from when the price tanked. So anyway, so there was a sort of compounding of a bunch of issues that went wrong, and the whole system kind of failed. The project itself lived. Luckily, they had another token that they used for governing the project. It had some value, and so they said, we're just going to issue a whole bunch more of this token. We're going to give it out to people, and that's how we'll give them basically their money back. There were some other people, though, that lost money permanently, and there were some lawsuits where people sued the company saying, you said that this was safe, this was like a safe thing, and you had all these countermeasures like liquidation put into place, and yet we lost money as a result, and we're not happy about it. And so that was sent to arbitration. I don't think there's been a result yet from it. Okay, so that's DAI. Then the final thing I'll mention are sometimes called algorithmic stablecoins. And in this case, you have a smart contract that's going to operate like a central bank. So we saw how the central bank will increase or decrease the amount of money in supply to impact interest rates. And so it's going to operate on kind of the same principle, where it's going to increase or decrease supply. But in this case, it's going to try and influence the price relative to, say, the US dollar. So if it sees that it's getting the price is going up relative to the US dollar, it will issue a whole bunch of new tokens. And now that there's more tokens in circulation, they're worth less, and that should bring the price down. And then if the price is going down, what they'll do is they'll pull tokens out of circulation so they're more scarce in an attempt to try and get people to pay more for it because there's more competition to get it. Okay. Now, the second thing is the problem. Okay, so the problem with these systems is how do you decrease? I mean, it's obvious how you can increase supply. You just print more tokens. You have to decide who you're going to give them to. But how do you decrease supply? And how do you make sure that it's fair? So decreasing supply means that you're taking money out of people's pockets. Well, who are you choosing to take the money out of? And so there's really complicated systems where they introduce these instruments and people like voluntarily give up their money to buy some prediction on the future. Basically, like when the currency is struggling, people voluntarily give up their money in order to get newly printed money sometime in the future when the system is on the other side where the value of the currency is going up. I won't go through the details. You don't have to understand the details for this course. What I might refer you to is there is a paper that we wrote, and we go through all of the different types of systems, and including DAI and Tether, those types of systems. And so if you're really interested in this or you want to do a project in this area, you can see this paper. It's called Demystifying Stablecoins. It was in the communications of the ACM. So I'll just refer you there for details. I won't go through it. It would take an hour to explain how these work. And at the end of the day, there's a lot of speculation that they even work at all. Okay, so a lot of people are skeptical about algorithmic stablecoins. A lot of the projects that have tried to do it have failed. In fact, there's no real successful algorithmic stablecoin that's been running for multiple years that was able to maintain its stability. And so whether this whole approach works is a big question mark. There's definitely some room there for experimentation. Okay, so that's it for now, and I'll see you later.